The Simpsons has been on the air since December 17th, 1989. Over 800 episodes, 37 seasons. It is the longest-running American animated series in television history, and the longest-running American primetime scripted series, period. Everyone knows Homer's dough. Everyone knows Bart's Eat My Shorts. You've seen the Yellow Family on t-shirts, lunchboxes, and memes your entire life. But here's what most people don't realize. Underneath 35 years of couch gags and Treehouse of Horror specials, there are fan theories about this show that will genuinely change the way you look at everything. Some of them are silly, some of them are disturbingly well supported, and one of them got so popular that the actual showrunner of The Simpsons had to go on TMZ and publicly deny it was true. So let's start with the darkest one. Homer Simpson has been in a coma since 1993. Everything you've watched since then, every single episode from season 4 onward, all of it is happening inside the mind of a dying man lying in a hospital bed. And the evidence for this is way more convincing than it has any right to be. It starts with a conversation between Homer and God. In season 4, episode 3, an episode called Homer the Heretic, Homer decides to skip church one freezing cold Sunday morning. While Marge drags the kids through a blizzard to sit through a broken furnace and a rambling sermon, Homer stays home and has the greatest day of his life. He dances in his underwear, makes moon waffles, wins a radio contest, watches football, and finds a penny under the couch. When Marge gets home and finds out Homer is quitting church entirely, she's horrified. The episode plays out with Homer starting his own religion, the town trying to win him back, and eventually his house catching fire because he fell asleep with a lit cigar. After his friends from different faiths save his life, Homer agrees to give church another shot. He falls asleep during the next service and has a dream where God appears to him again. And during this dream, Homer asks God a question. He asks what the meaning of life is. God tells Homer he can't reveal that. Homer pushes. God says Homer will find out when he dies. Homer says he can't wait that long. And then God says something that changes the entire show if you think about it long enough. God says, "You can't wait 6 months?" Homer convinces God to start telling him the answer, but the episode cuts to credits before we hear it. Most people treat this as a throwaway joke. The show does this kind of thing all the time. Cut before the punchline, leave the audience hanging, move on to next week. But here's where it gets weird. That episode aired on October 8th, 1992. Exactly 6 months later, on April 1st, 1993, Season 4, Episode 18 aired. The episode is called So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show. It was the show's first ever clip show, directed by Carlos Baeza and written by John Vitti, with contributions from Al Jean, Mike Rice, and several other writers. And in this episode, Bart plays an April Fool's prank on Homer by shaking up a can of Duff beer using an industrial paint shaker at a hardware store, then cranking up the thermostat in the house so Homer would get hot and go for a cold beer. Homer opens the can, and the explosion is so massive it blows the roof off the house and puts Homer in the hospital. While recovering, Homer sees a vending machine and tries to get a candy bar. The machine tips over and crushes him. Homer falls into a coma. Now, at the end of the episode, Homer wakes up. He comes out of the coma and immediately starts choking Bart. The show treats his recovery as sudden and basically plays it for laughs. But a Reddit user named Hard to Pick a Name proposed something in 2015 that sent shockwaves through the Simpsons fan community. What if Homer never actually woke up? What if that sudden, convenient recovery was too good to be true? What if everything that happened on The Simpsons from that point forward is a coma dream? Think about the timing. God told Homer he'd die in 6 months. 6 months later, Homer is crushed by a vending machine and falls into a coma. God didn't lie. God doesn't get things wrong. He told Homer his normal life would end in 6 months, and it did. Whether Homer technically died or entered a vegetative state doesn't really matter. His life as he knew it was over on April 1st, 1993. Now think about what the show looked like before that episode versus what it looked like after. Before the coma, The Simpsons was a grounded show about a working-class family dealing with real problems. Homer tried to give up drinking. Marge considered being unfaithful. Lisa developed a crush on her substitute teacher. Bart struggled in school. These were relatable, human stories set in a slightly exaggerated version of suburban America. After the coma episode, the show changes. Dramatically, Homer gets launched into space. He works for a James Bond villain named Hank Scorpio. Mr. Burns discovers the Loch Ness Monster. Homer finds a magic stone that grants wishes. Marge gets breast implants. Baby Maggie shoots the richest man in town. The plots become increasingly surreal, increasingly detached from anything resembling normal life. If you accept that Homer is dreaming all of this from a hospital bed, the shift makes perfect sense. His brain is generating increasingly wild scenarios because it has no real-world input to keep it grounded. Dreams don't follow rules. Dreams don't care about logic or physics. And the longer someone stays in a coma, the more their dream state would drift from reality. The character's never aging is another piece of the puzzle. Bart has been 10 years old for over 3 decades. Lisa has been 8. Maggie is still a baby. In the real world, this is just how animated shows work. Characters don't age because the show needs to maintain its status quo. But inside the logic of this theory, it makes perfect sense. Homer's brain froze his family at the ages they were when he last saw them. He can't imagine them getting older because he hasn't been conscious to watch it happen. But here's the really clever part. Technology in the show does advance. The Simpsons have had cell phones, smartphones, tablets, social media, and video calls in recent seasons. The kids use TikTok. Homer has a flat-screen TV. If the characters were truly frozen in time, the technology should be frozen too. But if Homer's in a coma, he might be subconsciously hearing things happening in his hospital room. A nurse's phone going off, a TV playing in the background, in news broadcasts filtering through his unconscious mind. Homer's brain incorporates these modern details into his dream, which is why Springfield has iPhones but Bart is still in the 4th grade. The celebrity cameos fit the same pattern. The Simpsons is famous for having hundreds of celebrity guest appearances over the decades. Actors, athletes, musicians, politicians, they all show up in Springfield to hang out with Homer and his family. Under the coma theory, these celebrities are people Homer is hearing mentioned on television or radio while he lies unconscious. His brain takes the name, attaches it to a face he vaguely remembers, and inserts them into the dream. That's why the cameos got more frequent and more random as the show went on. Homer's brain is just grabbing whatever stimulus it can find and weaving it into the narrative. There's also the question of why the show shifted its focus. In the early seasons, Bart was the breakout star. Bartmania was a real cultural phenomenon in the early 1990s. T-shirts, catchphrases, magazine covers, all Bart. But after the coma episode, the show gradually shifts to being Homer's show. Homer becomes the central character. Homer gets the most screen time, the most adventures, the most development. If the entire show after season 4 is Homer's dream, of course he'd make himself the main character. Of course the dream would revolve around him. His brain isn't going to spend time focusing on a 10-year-old's adventures at school. It's going to focus on Homer because Homer is the one dreaming. And then there's Homer's sudden acquisition of impossible skills. After the coma, Homer can suddenly do things he was never capable of before. He becomes an astronaut. He becomes a successful musician. He becomes a boxer, a food critic, a monorail conductor, a snowplow driver, a vigilante, a bodyguard. Homer goes from being a lovable but incompetent nuclear safety inspector to a man who can apparently do anything. That screams wish fulfillment. That's a man lying in a hospital bed dreaming of all the lives he could have lived if things had been different. This theory got so big that it made international news. It was covered in Australia, Belgium, and dozens of other countries. It hit the front page of Yahoo. TMZ actually went to Simpsons showrunner Al Jean for a comment. Jean called the theory intriguing but false. But he didn't explain why it was false. He didn't point to any specific evidence that disproved it. He just said it wasn't true and moved on. The writers of The Simpsons clearly know about this theory because they have addressed it directly. In season 34, episode 3, an episode called Lisa the Boy Scout that aired on October 9th, 2022. The show features a meta-framing device where anonymous hackers threaten to air fake deleted scenes from the show's history. One of these deleted scenes directly addresses the coma theory. Homer wakes up and realizes that everything after his jump into Springfield Gorge from the season 2 episode Bart the Daredevil was all a dream. The show presents this as a joke, something so absurd that it would destroy The Simpsons if it were real. But the fact that the writers felt the need to address it, even as comedy, tells you how deeply this theory has embedded itself in the fan consciousness. And here's what makes this theory genuinely unsettling, whether you believe it or not. Every time Homer survives something that should kill him, and this happens constantly, there's a version of this show where that moment doesn't mean Homer is lucky. It means his brain is refusing to let go. Every time the plot gets more surreal and disconnected from reality, there's a reading where that's Homer losing his grip, his dream state drifting further and further from anything real. Every time a new celebrity shows up in Springfield for no reason, there's an interpretation where Homer is just processing noise from the hospital room, desperately incorporating any stimulus into a dream that keeps him feeling alive. The saddest part is what this means for the other characters. Marge, Bart, Lisa, Maggie. They've been living their real lives this whole time. They've been aging, growing, changing. Lisa might have graduated college by now. Bart could have kids of his own. Maggie might be a teenager. And Homer has missed all of it. He's been lying in that hospital bed for over 30 years, dreaming of a world where his family stays exactly the same forever, where nothing ever really changes, and where he's always the hero of his own story. Whether Homer Simpson is in a coma or not, this theory forces you to look at the show differently. It turns 30 years of comedy into something much darker, a man frozen in time, dreaming endlessly while the world moves on without him. And every new episode is just another hallucination from a brain that refuses to accept that the party ended in 1993. Homer's coma theory explains why the show got weirder over time. But there's another theory that explains something even more basic about the show, something you've been staring at for 35 years without ever questioning it. Why is everyone in Springfield yellow? The real answer is pretty boring. Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, told the BBC that he wanted the show to stand out visually. He said when an animator showed him the color yellow for the characters, he knew immediately that it was the answer. His exact reasoning was that if you were flipping through channels with your remote control and a flash of yellow went by, you'd instantly know you were watching The Simpsons. Writer Mike Rice later explained that the choice also solved a practical animation problem. Bart, Lisa, and Maggie don't have hairlines. There's no line separating their skin from their hair, so the animators needed a color that could work as both skin and hair at the same time, and yellow did the job. That's the real story, a branding decision combined with an animation shortcut. Case closed. Except it's not, because there's a fan theory that provides an explanation that's way more disturbing and honestly, way more consistent with the world the show has built over 37 seasons. The theory goes like this: the residents of Springfield are yellow because they're all suffering from chronic radiation poisoning. The source of that radiation is the Springfield nuclear power plant, the facility where Homer Simpson has worked as a safety inspector for most of his adult life. And if you start looking at the evidence, it's everywhere. Start with the plant itself. The Springfield nuclear power plant is owned and operated by Charles Montgomery Burns, a man who is openly described as the richest and most evil person in Springfield. Burns has zero interest in safety, absolutely none. The plant is depicted throughout the series as a crumbling, leaking, understaffed death trap that somehow continues operating despite catastrophic safety violations in virtually every episode that features it. Homer was hired as a safety inspector while Marge was pregnant with Bart, which means the Simpson family has been exposed to whatever this plant is putting out for well over a decade of in-show time. Homer himself is a walking radiation exposure case study. He handles nuclear materials with his bare hands. He eats lunch next to the reactor core. He's been shown glowing green after exposure events. Chuck, in one episode, he causes a near meltdown because he got jelly from a donut on the reactor's temperature dial and couldn't read the warning signs. In Season 3, Episode 5, Homer Defined, Homer accidentally prevents a nuclear meltdown by choosing the emergency override button at random using a children's counting rhyme. The man responsible for the safety of an entire nuclear facility averted disaster by playing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Moe. That's not a comedy bit, that's a horror movie. But the radiation doesn't stay inside the plant. It gets out. And the show has been telling us this from the very beginning. In Season 2, Episode 4, 2 cars in every garage, and 3 eyes on every fish, Bart and Lisa discover a 3-eyed fish named Blinky living in the river near the power plant. Blinky is a confirmed mutation caused by radioactive runoff from Burns' facility. The entire episode revolves around this discovery and Burns' attempt to cover it up by running for governor. Here's the thing though, if the radiation is potent enough to give a fish a third eye, what is it doing to the people drinking that water, breathing that air, and living within a few miles of the plant for decades? The show answers that question more directly than people realize. In Season 8, Episode 10, The Springfield Files, Homer sees what he thinks is an alien in the woods. The whole town gets involved. It becomes this big mystery. And the reveal at the end is that the alien is actually Mr. Burns himself, who has been receiving so many medical treatments involving radiation that his body glows green. Burns literally radiates light because of how much nuclear exposure he's accumulated over his lifetime. The townspeople laugh it off. They call it a healthy green glow. But think about what that means. The owner of the nuclear plant is so irradiated that he's bioluminescent, and nobody cares. Then there's the Simpsons movie from 2007. The entire plot of the movie revolves around Springfield's pollution becoming so catastrophic that the Environmental Protection Agency places a giant dome over the entire town to contain the contamination. This isn't a subplot or a throwaway gag. This is the central premise of the show's theatrical film. The government of the United States decides that Springfield is so dangerously polluted that it needs to be sealed off from the rest of civilization. And the nuclear power plant is a major contributor to that pollution. The radiation theory extends beyond just the yellow skin. Some fans have argued that radiation from the plant is also responsible for the declining intelligence of Springfield's residents over the course of the series. There's a Reddit theory pointing out that characters like Ralph Wiggum actually showed borderline normal intelligence in early seasons. Ralph had coherent conversations, made reasonable observations, and acted like a regular kid. But as the seasons progressed, Ralph became increasingly bizarre and cognitively impaired, to the point where he's now basically non-functional. The theory argues this isn't bad writing. It's radiation slowly degrading the brains of everyone in Springfield. And it's not just Ralph. Look at Homer himself. In Season 12, in Episode 9, HOMR, the show reveals that Homer has had a crayon lodged in his brain since childhood. He shoved it up his nose and it got stuck. When a doctor removes it, Homer becomes a genius, solving complex equations and bonding with Lisa over intellectual conversations. But genius Homer is miserable. His friends reject him. He can't enjoy the simple pleasures that made his life bearable. So Homer voluntarily has the crayon reinserted. He chooses to be stupid because being smart made him too unhappy to function. Most people take this at face value. Homer is dumb because of a crayon. Simple, funny. But under the radiation theory, the crayon might not be the whole story. What if the crayon was already there, but the radiation from decades of working at the plant compounded the damage? What if Homer's brain was already deteriorating from chronic exposure, and the crayon just made it worse? What if the reason Homer can't function without the crayon isn't because the crayon itself is so important, but because his radiation-damaged brain has been compensating for the obstruction for so long that removing it destabilizes everything? The physical mutations in Springfield are everywhere if you look for them. Blinky the three-eyed fish is the most famous, but there are others. Characters in the show have unusual physical features that go beyond normal cartoon exaggeration. Overbites, missing fingers, bulging eyes, unusual skin conditions. The residents of Springfield have 4 fingers on each hand instead of 5. Yes, this is standard for animated characters, but within the logic of this theory, it's another mutation. Our radiation exposure during pregnancy is known to cause developmental abnormalities, and if the entire town has been bathing in low-level nuclear contamination for generations, widespread physical anomalies would be expected. There's even a deep-end version of this theory that goes fully off the rails. It comes from a creepypasta posted on the Spin Pasta wiki, and it argues that The Simpsons isn't actually a cartoon at all. The theory claims the show is a documentary about a real town whose residents have been devastated by a real nuclear disaster, and that Fox broadcasts it under the disguise of animation to cover up the truth. According to this version, the yellow skin, the bulging eyes, the missing fingers, all of it is real. Montgomery Burns represents a real energy executive working with political interests to suppress the story. And the animation is just the method they use to hide footage of real suffering people in plain sight. That version is obviously insane. But the less extreme version of the radiation theory is surprisingly hard to dismiss. The show itself provides an enormous amount of evidence that the Springfield nuclear power plant is leaking dangerous levels of radiation into the environment. The fish are mutated. The owner of the plant literally glows in the dark. The EPA tried to quarantine the entire town. Characters are getting dumber over time. And every single resident of Springfield has bright yellow skin that doesn't match any natural human coloring. Bat Groening chose yellow because it looked good on TV. That's the truth, but the show he created built a world where radiation poisoning is the more logical, in-universe explanation. The writers may not have intended it, but they accidentally created a version of Springfield where the jokes about nuclear safety aren't jokes at all. They're symptoms. And the funniest show on television might secretly be a portrait of an entire town slowly dying from the inside out, too oblivious or too damaged to even realize what's happening to them. If radiation is slowly cooking Springfield's residents from the inside, that might explain a lot about why the characters act the way they do. But there's another theory that takes this in a completely different direction, a theory that says the Simpson family isn't stupid at all. In fact, every single one of them might be a genius, and only one of them is brave enough or maybe foolish enough to actually use her brain. This theory has been floating around the internet for years, and it was popularized by a Reddit user named Kirby Clock. The idea is simple but surprisingly well supported. Every single member of the Simpson family is a genius. All of them. Homer, Marge, Bart, Maggie, even Grandpa Abe. The only one who openly embraces her intelligence is Lisa. And here's the kicker. Lisa is also the most miserable character in the entire show. The theory argues this is not a coincidence. The Simpsons have collectively figured out that intelligence leads to suffering, and all of them except Lisa have chosen to be happy instead of smart. Let's go through the family one by one. Start with Homer. Everyone treats Homer like he's the dumbest man alive. He's the town buffoon. He strangles his son, eats donuts by the dozen, drinks Duff beer until he passes out, and has nearly destroyed Springfield on multiple occasions through sheer incompetence. But the show has explicitly told us that Homer's stupidity has a physical cause. In Season 12, Episode 9, Homer, doctors discover that Homer has a crayon lodged in his frontal lobe. He shoved it up his nose as a child and it got stuck in his brain. When the crayon is surgically removed, Homer becomes brilliant. He starts solving advanced mathematical equations. He writes a formal report that gets the Springfield nuclear power plant shut down for safety violations. He has deep intellectual conversations with Lisa for the first time in her life. Lisa finally has the father she's always wanted, but it doesn't last. Genius Homer is brilliant, but he's also desperately unhappy. And his friends at Moe's Tavern don't want to hang out with him anymore because he makes them feel stupid. He can no longer enjoy beer, television, or donuts the way he used to because his enhanced brain processes everything too critically. He becomes acutely aware of how dysfunctional his life is, how much potential he's wasted, and how little time he has left. The weight of intelligence crushes him, so Homer goes back to the hospital and asks them to put the crayon back in. He voluntarily chooses brain damage because being smart made him too miserable to function. He writes Lisa a letter before the procedure, knowing he won't be able to express these thoughts afterward. And then he has himself made stupid again. That's not the behavior of a dumb person. That's the behavior of someone who tried intelligence, found it unbearable, and made a conscious decision to opt out. Homer didn't stumble into stupidity by accident. He chose it, and the show strongly implies this isn't the first time he's made that kind of choice. Now look at Marge. Marge is consistently depicted as a highly capable woman who excels at virtually everything she attempts. Throughout the series, she's been a successful real estate agent, a police officer, a carpenter, an artist whose paintings impressed even the harshest critics, and a playwright. In flashback episodes showing her high school years, Marge is portrayed as an excellent student with real academic potential. She was smart, driven, and capable of pursuing any career she wanted. But Marge chose Homer. She chose motherhood. She chose to be a homemaker in a small town instead of pursuing a career that matched her abilities. And the show frames this as Marge making a deliberate trade. She exchanged professional achievement for domestic happiness. She saw what ambition looked like, what intelligence demanded in terms of stress and sacrifice, and she said no thanks. She'd rather be content than accomplished. That's the same trade Homer made, just expressed differently. Bart is where this theory gets really interesting. Everyone thinks of Bart as the family screw-up. He's the kid who will never amount to anything. He gets terrible grades. He disrupts every classroom he's ever been in. Teachers have given up on him. Principal Skinner has essentially written him off as a lost cause. But the show has given us repeated evidence that Bart is actually remarkably intelligent when he wants to be. In Season 1, Episode 11, Nick of the Crepes of Wrath, Bart is sent to France as an exchange student. Within weeks, he picks up French fluently, not conversationally, fluently. He learns an entire foreign language in less than a month through pure immersion. That's not something a stupid person does. That's an extraordinary aptitude for language acquisition that most adults can't match. Bart also ghost-wrote an itchy and scratchy episode that won an award demonstrating genuine creative writing ability. He created an animated short called Angry Dad that won an Academy Award. He's pulled off elaborate pranks that require sophisticated planning, timing, and an intuitive understanding of human psychology. Bart's not dumb. Bart is bored. He's a creative genius trapped in a system that only values one kind of intelligence, the kind Lisa has. And he's checked out because that system has nothing to offer him. Bart chose chaos over conformity for the same reason Homer chose the crayon. Being smart in Springfield means being Lisa. It means being anxious, depressed, disappointed by everyone around you, and fundamentally alone. Bart looked at that deal and said, absolutely not. He'd rather be the class clown than the class genius, because at least the class clown has friends. Then there's Maggie. Baby Maggie is 1 year old and has been 1 year old for 37 seasons. But in that single year of life, she has accomplished things that most adults never will. She shot Mr. Burns with a handgun, not accidentally. The show reveals in Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 2, that Maggie pulled the trigger. She's saved Homer's life on multiple occasions, demonstrating awareness, timing, and decision-making far beyond what any infant should be capable of. She's been shown organizing other babies, solving problems, and displaying logical reasoning that puts her solidly in the genius category. Maggie hasn't chosen between intelligence and happiness yet because she's too young to understand the choice. She's operating on pure ability without the social awareness to realize that being smart will eventually make her miserable. The theory predicts that Maggie will eventually face the same fork in the road that every other Simpson has faced. She'll either become another Homer, another Bart, another Marge, choosing ignorance for the sake of joy, or she'll become another Lisa. Brilliant, accomplished, and profoundly sad. Even Grandpa Abe fits the pattern. Abraham Simpson is portrayed as a senile old man who tells rambling, incoherent stories and can barely function in daily life. But the show's flashbacks tell a very different story. Young Abe was an accomplished World War II pilot who flew dangerous combat missions. He's been shown as a capable spy, a talented musician, and a man who pulled off genuinely impressive feats of intelligence and bravery during his younger years. His decline into apparent senility mirrors the pattern we see in the rest of the family. Abe was smart when he had to be, but as soon as the war was over and the pressure was off, he checked out. He let himself become the bumbling old man everyone expects him to be, because the alternative was carrying the weight of everything he'd seen and done. And then there's Lisa. Lisa is the exception that proves the entire theory. She's the one Simpson who chose intelligence. She's an 8-year-old who plays saxophone at a professional level, maintains straight A's, has strong opinions on politics and philosophy, became a vegetarian on ethical grounds after Season 7, Episode 5, Lisa the Vegetarian, and converted to Buddhism after a genuine spiritual search. Lisa is everything a parent could dream of in a child. And she is absolutely miserable. Lisa is easily the most depressed character in The Simpsons. She's constantly disappointed by the world around her. She's isolated from her peers because none of them share her interests. She seeks her father's approval but rarely gets genuine intellectual engagement from him. She's the lonely genius in a family of people who chose not to be geniuses, and she can't understand why they made that choice because she's never experienced the alternative. The genius theory reframes the entire show as a tragedy disguised as a comedy. Every member of the Simpson family had the potential to be extraordinary. Homer could have been a scientist. Marge could have been an executive. Bart could have been a creative prodigy. But each of them looked at what intelligence costs, looked at what it did to Lisa, and decided that happiness was more important than achievement. They chose to be dumb because being dumb is the only way to survive in Springfield without losing your mind. And Lisa, the one who chose differently, proves every day that they were right. Her intelligence hasn't made her successful or fulfilled. It's made her anxious, isolated, and perpetually disappointed. Lisa is the smartest person in Springfield, and she's paying for it with her happiness every single day of her life. And the genius theory suggests that the Simpson family figured out something most people never do. Sometimes the smartest choice you can make is to stop being smart. Sometimes ignorance isn't a weakness, it's a survival strategy. And the fact that Homer, the man everyone calls an idiot, was smart enough to figure this out before anyone else might make him the real genius of the family after all. If the Simpsons are secretly brilliant, then Homer's ridiculous financial situation might not be what it seems either. Because there's a theory that Homer Simpson isn't just smart enough to choose happiness over intelligence. He might also be a billionaire who forgot about it. In Season 8, Episode 2, an episode called You Only Move Twice, Homer takes a new job with the Globex Corporation, run by a man named Hank Scorpio. Scorpio is charismatic, a funny and genuinely supportive of Homer as an employee. He's also a supervillain actively trying to take over the world. The episode is widely considered one of the greatest Simpsons episodes ever made, and Hank Scorpio consistently ranks as one of the most beloved one-off characters in the show's history. At the end of the episode, Homer has to quit because Marge and the kids are unhappy in their new town. Scorpio is disappointed but understanding. As a goodbye gift, he gives Homer the Denver Broncos. Homer's upset because he wanted the Dallas Cowboys instead. He looks at the Broncos like someone who just got socks for Christmas. And then the show moves on. The storyline is never resolved. Homer never mentions the Denver Broncos again. The gift is never referenced. It's treated as a throwaway punchline. But here's the thing. Homer never gave the team back. There's no episode where he sells the Broncos. There's no scene where Scorpio takes back the gift. As far as the show's internal logic is concerned, Homer Simpson owns the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos were purchased by the Walton Penner ownership group in 2022 for approximately $4.65 billion, making it the most expensive sale in NFL history at that time. Obviously, the show's fictional valuation doesn't perfectly track real-world sales. But within the universe of The Simpsons, if Homer has owned an NFL franchise since 1996, he's sitting on a fortune so massive that his yearly salary at the nuclear plant is essentially pocket change. This would explain one of the longest-running questions in the show's history. How does Homer afford his lifestyle? He lives in a 4-bedroom house at 742 Evergreen Terrace. He drives a car. His family goes on vacations constantly. He eats enormous quantities of food. He's destroyed property worth millions of dollars over the course of the series with seemingly no financial consequences. The Simpson family's lifestyle doesn't match a nuclear plant worker's salary, even by cartoon standards. The Broncos theory says Homer can afford all of this because he's technically a billionaire. He just forgot about the team because he didn't want it in the first place. Homer wanted the Cowboys, he got the Broncos. In Homer's mind, the Broncos are a disappointment, so he put them out of his head entirely. Meanwhile, the franchise generates revenue, accumulates value, and funds Homer's lifestyle without him even realizing it. There's a second financial theory that works alongside this one, and it's equally compelling. In Season 5, Episode 1, Homer's Barbershop Quartet, Homer reveals that he was once the frontman of a barbershop quartet called the B Sharps. The group consisted of Homer, Barney Gumble, Apu Nahasapima Petalon, and Principal Seymour Skinner. The B Sharps became a massive cultural phenomenon, achieving Beatles-level fame and winning a Grammy Award. They had hit albums, sold out concerts, and were recognized across the country. The band eventually broke up, as all great bands do. But a Grammy-winning album doesn't stop generating royalties just because the band stops performing. Music royalties can pay out for decades, and if the B Sharps' album was even moderately successful by real-world standards, all 4 members would still be collecting checks. This theory explains more than just Homer's finances. It explains why every member of the B Sharps seems to have more money than their day jobs would suggest. Barney Gumble is a chronic alcoholic who spends most of his time at Moe's Tavern. His bar tab is described at one point as being so astronomically high that only NASA can calculate it. Where is Barney getting the money to sustain that kind of drinking habit? He doesn't have a steady job, but if he's collecting B Sharps royalties, the math starts to work. Apu Nahasapima Petalon works at the Quickie Mart, a convenience store. The pay for that kind of work is not luxurious, but Apu drives a nice sports car. He supports a wife and 8 children. He lives comfortably in Springfield. How? B Sharp's royalties would fill that gap. Principal Skinner lives in a suspiciously nice house for someone on a public school administrator's salary. He seems financially stable, despite Springfield's school system being notoriously underfunded. Once again, residual income from a Grammy-winning album would explain the discrepancy. The combined theory goes like this. Homer Simpson is an NFL franchise owner and a Grammy-winning recording artist who has completely forgotten about both accomplishments. He doesn't think of himself as wealthy because wealth was never his goal. Homer wanted the Dallas Cowboys, not the Denver Broncos. Homer wanted to keep singing with his friends, not manage a music career. The money is there. It's always been there. Homer just doesn't care about it because money doesn't make him happy. Beer, donuts, television, and his family make him happy. Everything else is noise. If you layer this on top of the genius theory from earlier, it gets even more interesting. Homer is a man who is smart enough to know that intelligence leads to suffering, rich enough to never worry about money, and wise enough to realize that neither of those things matter as much as sitting on the couch with a Duff beer and watching TV with his family. Homer Simpson might be the most self-actualized character in television history. He figured out what makes him happy, eliminated everything that doesn't, and structured his entire life around maximum contentment. And everyone around him thinks he's an idiot for it. If you're enjoying this video so far, subscribe to our channel, because we're just getting started. Homer might be rich and secretly smart, but there's one mystery about this show that even money and intelligence can't solve. A mystery that consumed the entire United States for an entire summer. A mystery where the writers ran a national contest and, according to the DVD commentary, not a single person in the official judging pool guessed the right answer. The question is simple. Who really shot Mr. Burns? In Season 6, Episode 25, the season finale that aired on May 21st, 1995, the show did something it had never done before. It ended on a cliffhanger. Mr. Burns, the evil billionaire who owns the nuclear power plant, has enacted a plan to block out the sun over Springfield using a giant mechanical disc. His goal is to make the entire town dependent on his power plant for energy by eliminating solar power entirely. This plan affects everyone in Springfield. Everyone has a reason to want Burns dead. Burns is confronted in the town square near a sundial. He's shot by someone. He collapses onto the sundial with his arms positioned, pointing to the letters S and M, and the episode ends. Who did it? America went insane trying to figure it out. Fox ran an official contest inviting viewers to guess the shooter. The prize was supposed to be the winner getting animated into an episode of the show. The contest generated massive national attention. This was appointment television at a time when there was no streaming, no social media, no way to binge watch the answer. You watched the finale in May, and you waited all summer until the premiere in September to find out who did it. The answer, revealed in Season 7, Episode 1, was baby Maggie Simpson. So Burns had encountered Maggie in the parking lot and tried to take a lollipop from her. His gun fell out of his holster. Maggie grabbed it and it went off. The baby did it. Now here's where it gets really interesting. According to the DVD commentary for these episodes, which features the actual writers and producers discussing the making of the show, nobody in the official contest judging pool guessed Maggie. The contest rules required that a winner be selected from a random sample of entries, and none of the entries in that sample had the correct answer. So the selected winner was paid a cash prize instead of being animated into the show. The producers did note on the commentary that they were aware of one person who posted the correct answer to a Simpsons news group on the internet the night Part 1 aired. Now they wanted to contact this person after the contest ended, but the individual had used a college internet account, and by the time summer was over, the address was no longer valid. They could never track the person down. On the DVD, the producers issued an open invitation for this mystery person to come forward. But here's the thing that keeps fans arguing decades later. The clues don't perfectly point to Maggie. Burns himself said on the show that pointing to the letters M and S on the sundial was not intentional. It was just where his arms landed when he fell. So using that as evidence is unreliable. The show laid out specific criteria for the shooter. The person had to be someone who was unarmed, since they used Burns' own gun. The person had to be someone Burns had met before and knew by name. The person had to be someone who, under normal circumstances, wouldn't intimidate Burns. And the shooting had to be a crime of passion, committed in the heat of the moment. Maggie fits most of these criteria, She's unarmed, she's met Burns before, she certainly doesn't intimidate him. And grabbing a gun that fell into her lap is about as impulsive as it gets. But some fans have pointed out alternative suspects who also fit. Marge, for instance, is unarmed at the scene. Burns knows her name. She wouldn't normally intimidate him. And she had a strong emotional motive since Burns' sun-blocking scheme directly threatened her family. Some fans have argued that Marge is actually a better fit for the Clue profile than Maggie. The producers chose Maggie because it was the most shocking and thematically resonant answer. A baby committing a shooting is absurd, horrifying, and deeply satirical all at once. It's the perfect Simpsons punchline. But the fact that the clues could point to other characters has kept this debate alive for nearly 30 years. Some fans believe the writers retroactively chose Maggie and adjusted the Part 2 script to fit rather than having planned it from the beginning. Others believe the whole exercise was designed so that multiple suspects could theoretically work, making the mystery genuinely unsolvable. What makes this so fascinating is what it says about the show's relationship with its audience. The Simpsons created a mystery so compelling that it dominated American pop culture for an entire summer. They invited millions of people to solve it, and when the answer was revealed, it was simultaneously satisfying and unsatisfying, the perfect answer and no answer at all. A baby with a gun, the most innocent character in the show committing the most violent act. It's the kind of answer that only The Simpsons could get away with. The Who Shot Mr. Burns mystery consumed the country for a summer. But there's an even older question about The Simpsons that people have been arguing about since the show started. A question that seems simple on the surface, but leads somewhere genuinely disturbing if you follow it far enough. Where is Springfield? This sounds like a straightforward trivia question. The Simpsons live in Springfield. Springfield is a city in the United States. So which state is it in? Oregon, Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky? The answer is that the show has made it literally impossible to figure out. And some fans think that's not a joke. For they think Springfield doesn't exist in any normal sense of the word. Matt Groening has said he named the town after Springfield, Oregon, where he grew up. That seems like it should settle the debate. But the show itself has spent decades actively contradicting every possible location. Springfield has an ocean coastline. It also has deserts. It has mountains and a gorge. It has farmland, forests, rivers, and swamps. No single real-world location in the United States has all of these geographical features within driving distance of each other. Springfield is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The show has explicitly placed Springfield in different states across different episodes. In Behind the Laughter, the season 11 mockumentary episode, the family is described as being from northern Kentucky in one broadcast version. But in a different version that aired in reruns, the location was changed entirely. The show doesn't just refuse to pin down its location, it actively changes the answer depending on when you're watching. Characters from Springfield have described their town as being near the coast, near a major city, in the middle of nowhere, and directly adjacent to several different states, all within the same series. Homer has driven to various real-world locations in time frames that would be geographically impossible from any single starting point. Springfield has neighboring towns and cities that don't correspond to any real geography. The show isn't just being vague about where Springfield is, it's building a place that can't exist on any real map. Now, most people write this off as intentional comedy. Or if the whole point is that Springfield is any town USA, it's supposed to represent every small American city, which is why it can't be pinned to one location. And that's true from a writing perspective. But within the universe of the show, the geographical impossibility of Springfield raises some unsettling questions. Because it's not just geography that doesn't work in Springfield. Time doesn't work either. The Simpsons uses what's called a floating timeline. The characters don't age, but the world around them does. When the show started in 1989, Homer and Marge's courtship was set in the 1970s. In later flashback episodes, their high school years have been moved to the 1990s to keep them roughly the same age. Bart and Lisa have been children in the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. They've experienced cultural moments spanning 4 different decades while remaining exactly the same age. Technology advances normally in Springfield. The family started with a rotary phone and a tube television. Now they have smartphones, tablets, streaming services, and social media. Springfield had dial-up internet in the late 1990s and high-speed Wi-Fi in recent seasons. The Simpsons use TikTok. They have YouTube channels. In one season, 35 episode, the family becomes viral content creators. The world modernizes, but the people inside it stay frozen. This is standard for any long-running cartoon. Nobody expects Bart to graduate from elementary school. But if you treat Springfield as a real place within the fiction, the implications are profoundly weird. The residents of Springfield exist in a town where time moves forward for technology and culture, but stands still for biological aging. Nobody gets older. Nobody dies permanently. Characters who are killed in one episode return in the next with no explanation. Springfield operates outside the normal rules of time and space. Some fans have taken this further and argue that Springfield is a pocket reality, a bubble dimension where the laws of physics are fundamentally different from the rest of the world. The characters are trapped in a loop they can't perceive, reliving variations of the same time frame over and over again while the external universe moves forward around them. They're aware of the outside world, they react to cultural changes and world events, but they themselves remain static. They can never grow, never change, and never truly progress. They're stuck. The annual Treehouse of Horror specials take on new significance under this reading. Every Halloween, Springfield is destroyed, invaded by aliens, consumed by supernatural forces, or warped by alternate realities. The show officially treats these episodes as non-canonical. They don't really happen. But what if they do? What if the Treehouse of Horror episodes are glimpses of what's actually happening to Springfield's unstable reality? What if the dimensional bubble that contains the town occasionally tears, allowing cosmic threats to bleed through? The residents experience these horrors, and then the bubble resets. Time snaps back. Everyone forgets. And the cycle begins again. This would explain why Springfield's residents never seem to learn from their experiences. As Homer has nearly destroyed the town hundreds of times, Lisa has discovered and exposed corruption on a massive scale. Bart has accidentally triggered apocalyptic events, but nothing ever changes. The town always returns to its default state. If Springfield is a temporal anomaly, a place where cause and effect don't function normally, then the reset isn't lazy writing. It's a feature of the reality the characters inhabit. The season 34 episode, Lisa the Boy Scout, plays directly into this. The episode features fake, deleted scenes revealed by hackers, including a sequence where a 30-year-old Bart from the future travels back in time to the first episode, Simpsons roasting on an open fire from 1989. Future Bart is drawn in modern animation style to contrast with the original character designs. He lists off predictions that the show made about the real world. The show is openly acknowledging that its timeline is impossible, that its characters exist in a state that defies normal logic, and that the entire concept of Simpsons continuity is a paradox. When you combine all of this, Springfield starts to feel less like a fictional town and more like a prison. The characters are trapped in an impossible geography that connects to everywhere and nowhere. They're trapped in a timeline that moves forward for the world but stands still for them. They experience disasters, traumas, and revelations that should fundamentally change their lives, but they always snap back to the same starting position. Springfield isn't just a setting, it's a cage made of suspended time and impossible space. Time, the characters inside it don't even know they're trapped. The scariest part is that there might be evidence of this inside the show itself. Characters occasionally break the fourth wall. Homer has looked directly at the camera. Bart has addressed the audience. The show has referenced its own status as a television program. What if these aren't just meta-comedy moments? What if the characters are dimly aware on some level that their reality isn't real? What if Homer's nihilism and Bart's destructiveness and Lisa's depression all stem from a subconscious understanding that they're trapped in a loop, that nothing they do will ever truly matter, that no amount of effort or intelligence or love can change the fundamental nature of their prison? Springfield exists outside normal reality. Time doesn't work, geography doesn't work, death doesn't stick. And the people living there have no idea why their lives feel so endlessly, pointlessly repetitive. If that's the case, it would explain one of the show's most persistent mysteries. A mystery involving a man who dies over and over and over again and keeps coming back every time like nothing happened. His name is Hans Moleman, and he might not be a man at all. Hans Moleman is one of the most recognizable background characters in The Simpsons. He's a tiny, hunched-over, elderly-looking man with thick glasses and a weak, quavering voice. He shows up randomly throughout the series, usually just long enough to suffer some kind of horrific accident. He gets run over by cars, he gets hit by wrecking balls, he gets buried alive, he gets set on fire, he gets crushed, he gets electrocuted. He's been declared dead on multiple occasions across multiple episodes, and every single time he comes back. Next episode, there's Hans Moleman walking around Springfield like absolutely nothing happened. No scars, no injuries, no memory of his previous death. He just exists again, ready to suffer a new catastrophe. In any normal show, this would just be a running gag. Cartoon characters don't stay dead. Kenny dies every episode in South Park and nobody questions it. But The Simpsons isn't as cartoonish as people think. Most characters in the show obey at least some rules of continuity. Maude Flanders dies in season 11 and stays dead. That death has lasting consequences for Ned and his family throughout the rest of the series. Fat Tony dies and is replaced by his cousin, Fit Tony, who gradually becomes Fat Tony. The show acknowledges death when it wants to, so why does Hans Moleman get a free pass? A theory originally posted by Reddit user Aaron3 offers an answer that's somehow both hilarious and deeply creepy. Hans Moleman isn't one person, he's a member of an underground species of mole people. A subterranean civilization of identical beings who all look like the same elderly man with thick glasses and a fragile body. Every time we see Hans Moleman die, that individual is actually dead. But then another member of the species wanders up to the surface, and Springfield's residents, who aren't the most observant people on the planet, assume it's the same guy. The evidence starts with his name, Hans Moleman, mole, man. It's right there. The writers named him after the exact thing this theory claims he is. That could be a coincidence. But the Simpsons writers are not known for accidental name choices. Character names in this show are deliberate. Bart is an anagram of brat. Homer is named after Matt Groening's actual father. Sideshow Bob's full name, Robert Underdunk Terwilliger, is an elaborate construction. These writers think about names. Then there's the age issue. In one episode, Moleman claims he is 31 years old. 31. Look at him. The man looks like he's 90, he moves like he's 90, he sounds like he's 90. If he's actually 31, then either he's aged catastrophically fast due to some kind of condition, or he's a member of a species that reaches physical maturity at what humans would consider elderly. A subterranean species that evolved in dark caves wouldn't necessarily age the same way surface-dwelling humans do. Their biology would be fundamentally different. Moleman has no established home, family, or backstory anywhere in the series. He just appears. He's never shown going home to a house. He's never shown interacting with family members. He has no job that we see consistently. He materializes in Springfield, suffers some catastrophe, and then another one materializes to replace him. He's like a video game enemy that respawns at the same location after you leave the area. His terrible luck could be explained by the mole people not understanding surface world hazards. Things that would be obvious dangers to anyone who grew up above ground, like traffic, Heavy machinery, or standing under things that are about to fall might be completely foreign to a being that evolved underground. Every Molman death is essentially a confused subterranean creature wandering into a world it doesn't understand, and getting killed by things it's never encountered before. The darker extension of this theory asks why the mole people keep coming to Springfield specifically. If Springfield sits on top of some kind of geological anomaly, whether it's the nuclear plant, a dimensional rift, or some other phenomenon, maybe the mole people are drawn to it. Maybe they've been trying to reclaim territory that humans built over their home. Or maybe the radiation from the power plant is affecting their underground habitat and driving them to the surface. Either way, Springfield's residents keep accidentally killing them, and the mole people keep sending up replacements. This is one of the sillier theories on this list, but it's also one of the most internally consistent. It explains a running gag that the show has never bothered to explain itself, and it feeds into the larger picture of Springfield as a place where nothing is quite what it seems, where death doesn't work the way it should, where people aren't always who they appear to be, where the surface reality hides something much stranger underneath. If Hans Moleman is part of a species that keeps dying and coming back, that raises a bigger question about the show's most normal-looking character. The guy who lives right next door to the Simpsons, the perfect Christian neighbor who never seems to age, never gets sick, and always bounces back from catastrophe with a smile. Ned Flanders. And some fans think there's a very good reason why Ned is so impossibly resilient. Ned Flanders is the devil. Or at the very least, he's something pretending to be human, and he's doing a slightly imperfect job of it. This sounds ridiculous on the surface. Ned is the nicest person in Springfield. He's kind, generous, patient, forgiving, and deeply devout. He's the moral compass of the entire town. He's everything Homer is not. But that's exactly what makes this theory so compelling. Ned is too perfect. Nobody is that good. And the show itself has hinted at this more than once. Start with Homer the Heretic, the same season 4 episode where Homer talks to God about the meaning of life. In that episode, Homer quits going to church. God appears in Homer's dream and is remarkably chill about it. God essentially tells Homer that skipping church isn't a big deal, that Homer can worship in his own way, and that God isn't offended, God is relaxed. God is understanding. God is fine with Homer's decision. Ned Flanders, on the other hand, is furious. Ned takes Homer's absence from church as a personal affront. He's more upset about Homer missing Sunday service than God is. Think about how strange that is. If God himself doesn't care whether Homer goes to church, why would Ned care so intensely? Unless Ned has a different reason for wanting Homer in that building. Unless Ned needs Homer in church for reasons that have nothing to do with Homer's spiritual well-being, then there's Ned's supernatural resilience. Over the course of the series, Ned has endured things that would break any normal human being. His wife Maud is killed in season 11 when she's hit by a t-shirt cannon at a NASCAR race. His house is destroyed by a hurricane in season 8's Hurricane Nettie. Homer has personally destroyed Ned's property, insulted his family, stolen from him, and made his life miserable in hundreds of ways across hundreds of episodes. Through all of it, Ned just keeps smiling. He forgives, he rebuilds, he moves on. That's not normal human behavior. That's something else wearing a human costume and doing its best impression of patience. Hurricane Nettie is the most revealing episode for this theory. After losing his home and having the entire town botch the rebuilding effort, Ned finally snaps. The mask comes off. And what's underneath is terrifying. Ned doesn't just get angry, he systematically destroys every single person in Springfield with precisely targeted insults. He knows exactly what will hurt each person the most. He goes after Marge's codependency, Homer's stupidity, Lenny's personal life, Bart's future. It's surgical, it's cruel, it's efficient, and it's completely out of character for the bumbling nice guy we've watched for 7 seasons. The show explains this away by revealing that young Ned was an uncontrollable terror as a child, and his parents had him subjected to an experimental behavioral modification therapy that lasted 8 months. The treatment essentially created Ned's nice personality by burying his real one under layers of conditioning. So the Ned we know isn't the real Ned, he's a construct, a mask placed over something much darker. Under the devil theory, the Hurricane Neddy breakdown is the closest we've ever come to seeing Ned's true nature. When the mask slips, he's not just angry, he's ancient, he's calculating. He knows things about everyone in town that he shouldn't know. He cuts to the core of each person's deepest insecurity with the precision of someone who's been studying them for a very long time. Here's another detail that fans have picked up on. Ned lives right next door to the most sinful man in Springfield. Homer represents virtually every deadly sin. He's gluttonous with food, slothful at work, wrathful toward Bart, envious of Flanders, greedy with money, prideful about his accomplishments, and lustful toward basically everything. If you were a supernatural entity whose job was to monitor and influence the most sinful soul in town, you'd want to live as close to him as possible. Ned's business is another clue. The Leftorium sells products for left-handed people. In Christian tradition, the left hand has been historically associated with evil and the devil. The word sinister literally comes from the Latin word for left. Ned built his entire livelihood around the left hand, the hand of the devil, and nobody in Springfield thought twice about it. The show even made this connection explicit. In Treehouse of Horror 4, a segment called The Devil and Homer Simpson, the devil appears in Springfield, and the devil's physical form is Ned Flanders. The writers specifically chose Ned's appearance for the devil character. They could have used anyone. They chose Ned, and while the show plays it as a one-off Halloween gag, the implication lingers. The writers saw a connection between Ned and the devil, and they put it on screen. If Ned Flanders is the devil or some kind of supernatural entity, then his entire relationship with Homer takes on a different meaning. He's not being patient because he's a good Christian. He's being patient because he's playing a long game. He's monitoring Homer, testing Homer, pushing Homer toward or away from certain behaviors. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every time Ned turns the other cheek, it's not generosity. It's strategy. Ned's darkness hides behind comedy, and that pattern runs through the whole show. There's another character who might be hiding something behind a joke, something way sadder than anyone realizes. Moe Syslak, the bartender, has been receiving prank calls from Bart Simpson since season 1. He falls for them every single time, and some fans think he's been in on the joke since the beginning. The theory goes like this. Moe knows it's Bart, so he's known for years. He plays along because the prank calls are the only genuine human interaction he gets that isn't someone ordering a drink. Think about it. Moe has met Bart in person dozens of times over the course of the series. Homer brings his entire family to the bar regularly. Moe has babysat the Simpson children. He's been to their house. He knows what a 10-year-old boy sounds like on the phone. The idea that Moe can't recognize the voice of his best customer's son after 30 years of call stretches believability well past the breaking point. Moe is one of the most deeply depressed characters in all of television. The show doesn't hide this. Multiple episodes deal explicitly with Moe's loneliness, his suicidal thoughts, his inability to form meaningful relationships. He has no love life, his bar is a dump. His customers are mostly alcoholics who use him as a means to get drunk, not as a friend to confide in. When the bar closes and everyone goes home, Moe is alone. The prank calls break that pattern. When Bart calls, Moe gets to be the center of a performance. He gets to react, to yell, to threaten, to be part of a story. Yes, he's the butt of the joke, but at least someone is paying attention to him. At least someone took the time to think of him, even if the thought was, who can I mess with today? For Moe, negative attention from a kid is better than no attention from anyone. Watch Moe's reactions carefully across the series. His anger at the prank calls gets more elaborate over time. His performances get bigger. He's not getting worse at detecting the pranks. He's getting better at playing along. There's even an episode where someone named Hugh Jass actually exists in the bar and answers the phone. The prank doesn't land because there's a real person with that name. And Moe seems almost disappointed. The game didn't play out the way he expected. His one source of predictable interaction got disrupted. This theory turns every prank call scene from a simple comedy bit into something genuinely heartbreaking. A lonely, depressed man pretending to be fooled by a child because the alternative is silence. That's one of the saddest things in the entire history of The Simpsons, and it's been hiding in plain sight behind a joke format since 1989. Moe's sadness hiding behind comedy is a running theme in this show, but the show itself might be hiding something much bigger in plain sight. A pattern of jokes that turned out not to be jokes at all, throwaway lines that became real, background gags that predicted actual world events, and some fans don't think any of it is a coincidence. Subscribe to our channel because we're about to go deep on the most famous theory of them all. The Simpsons has become arguably more famous for predicting the future than for any individual episode it has ever produced. Every time something major happens in the real world, whether it's a political event, a technological innovation, a corporate merger, or a cultural shift, someone on the internet finds a Simpsons clip that showed it first. The phrase, "The Simpsons predicted it," has become a meme so pervasive that it transcends the show's actual viewership. Do people who have never watched a single episode of The Simpsons know about the predictions? And the list of confirmed hits is genuinely unnerving. Let's start with the biggest one. In Season 11, Episode 17, an episode called Bart to the Future that aired on March 19th, 2000. The show depicts a future where Lisa has become the first female president of the United States. In one scene, Lisa is in the Oval Office and makes a reference to President Trump's budget. She says the country has inherited quite a budget crunch from the previous administration, and the previous president was Donald Trump. This aired 16 years before Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election. 16 years. In the year 2000, Trump was a celebrity real estate developer and occasional talk show guest. The idea of him becoming president was so absurd that the writers used it as a joke. The punchline was supposed to be that America had gotten so crazy that they elected a reality TV star. And then America went ahead and did exactly that. In Season 10, Episode 5, When You Dish Upon a Star, which aired in 1998, there's a background gag showing a sign that reads 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company. At the time, this was a joke about corporate consolidation. Fox and Disney were completely separate companies. 21 years later, in 2019, the Walt Disney Company completed its acquisition of 21st Century Fox's entertainment assets for $71.3 billion. The joke became reality. The Simpsons now airs on a network owned by the exact company the show joked would buy them. Then the show has depicted smartwatch technology years before the Apple Watch was announced. Multiple episodes from the 1990s and 2000s featured characters wearing wrist devices that functioned as communication tools and computers. Video calling was shown casually in episodes that aired more than a decade before FaceTime or Zoom became household tools. Characters in Springfield were making video calls on their televisions in the 1990s when real-world video calling was still the stuff of science fiction for most consumers. The show depicted autocorrect failures on phones before smartphones with touchscreen keyboards existed. There are episodes where characters type messages on devices and the machines change their words to something embarrassing or inappropriate. This predates the iPhone by years. There are episodes that appear to predict the FIFA corruption scandal, the Ebola outbreak fears, the discovery of the Higgs boson particle, the censorship of Michelangelo's David, the horse meat scandal in European food products, and dozens of other real-world events. A season 9 episode shows a sign at a voting booth that reads, "Go ahead, throw your vote away," accompanied by imagery of a rigged election that mirrors controversies that would emerge years later. Season 6's Lisa's Wedding predicts a future where a major university charges students using their fingerprints. Digital libraries have replaced physical books, and rolling news networks dominate information flow. The episode aired in 1995. Now, there are reasonable explanations for all of this. The show itself, through its own internal fact sheet documentation, it acknowledges that many of these predictions are coincidences arising from the show's enormous volume of episodes and willingness to satirize all aspects of contemporary life. When you produce over 800 episodes across 37 seasons covering literally every topic in American culture, from politics to technology to sports to corporate behavior, some of those jokes are statistically guaranteed to line up with future events. That's not prophecy, that's probability. The Trump prediction, for example, was based on a real cultural trend that the writers observed in 2000. Donald Trump had already flirted with running for president in 1999 under the Reform Party. He was a prominent public figure known for his wealth, his ego, and his media presence. The writers extrapolated a trend and made a joke about where that trend might lead. They weren't predicting the future, they were reading the present more carefully than most people and following the logic to its conclusion. The Disney-Fox merger prediction works the same way. By 1998, corporate consolidation in the entertainment industry was already a clear trend. Major media companies were buying each other at an accelerating rate. The idea that Disney, one of the most aggressively acquisitive companies in entertainment history, might one day buy Fox wasn't a wild guess. It was a reasonable extrapolation. The writers just happened to be right about which company would buy which, and they happened to make the joke 2 decades before it actually happened. Smartwatches, video calling, autocorrect, and these were all technologies that were being developed in labs and discussed in tech publications long before they became consumer products. Science fiction had been depicting risk communicators since the 1940s with Dick Tracy. The Simpsons wasn't predicting technology that nobody could imagine. It was depicting technology that engineers were already working on, just faster than the market could deliver it. But here's where it gets harder to dismiss. Some of the predictions aren't based on trend extrapolation. They're weirdly specific. The Trump prediction didn't just say a celebrity will become president, it named Trump specifically. The Disney prediction didn't just say Fox will be acquired, it showed the exact corporate relationship that would eventually exist. Some of these hits feel less like educated guesses and more like impossible coincidences. The spectrum of explanations among fans ranges from completely rational to completely unhinged. On the rational end, you have the survivorship bias argument. Nobody remembers the thousands of Simpsons jokes that didn't predict anything. For every prediction that came true, there are hundreds of jokes about the future that were completely wrong. We just don't make viral memes about the times the Simpsons got it wrong. In the middle, you have the cultural analyst argument. The Simpsons writing staff, particularly during the show's golden era, was one of the most intelligent rooms in television history. Many of these writers had degrees from Harvard and other top universities. They were voracious consumers of news, culture, and academic thought. When you fill a room with people that smart and ask them to satirize every aspect of American life, week after week, year after year, they're going to identify patterns that most people miss. The predictions aren't supernatural. They're the product of extremely smart people who paid very close attention to the world around them. On the far end, you have the conspiracy theorists. Matt Groening is a time traveler. The show's writers are part of a secret society with access to classified information about the future. The Simpsons is a program designed to acclimate the public to future events through predictive programming, softening the shock of major changes by presenting them as comedy first. These theories are, to be very clear, not supported by any evidence whatsoever. But they exist, and they're part of the discourse around this show. And then there's the most interesting theory of all, and it doesn't require time travel or secret societies. It suggests that The Simpsons doesn't predict the future. The Simpsons writes the future. The show is so deeply embedded in global culture, so pervasive in the collective unconscious of multiple generations, that it actually influences the decisions real people make. Decision makers who grew up watching The Simpsons carry the show's ideas in their heads. When they're faced with choices about the future, whether in politics, technology, business, or culture, the mental templates from The Simpsons are somewhere in their subconscious, shaping what feels possible, what feels inevitable, what feels like a good idea. Under this theory, Trump didn't become president because The Simpsons predicted it. Trump became president because millions of Americans had already been primed, through decades of cultural saturation, to accept the concept of a celebrity president as something that could happen. The Simpsons didn't see the future. The Simpsons helped create it. This might sound like a stretch, but consider how culturally influential this show actually is. The Simpsons has been cited by linguists as rivaling Shakespeare and the Bible for its contribution to the English language. The word dough was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. Words invented by the show, like ambigun and cromulent, coined as deliberate nonsense in the Season 7 episode Lisa the Iconoclast, have since been added to real dictionaries. The phrase cheese-eating surrender monkeys, originally spoken by groundskeeper Willie, has been used in actual political commentary and journalism. The Simpsons hasn't just reflected American culture, it has shaped American culture at the linguistic, political, and social level. A show with that much influence doesn't just predict things, it programs them, it normalizes concepts, it makes the impossible seem not just possible, but inevitable. When The Simpsons showed Trump as president in 2000, it planted a seed. When The Simpsons showed Disney owning Fox, it planted a seed. These seeds didn't grow overnight, but they grew. And when the real world eventually caught up, people said, The Simpsons predicted it, without realizing that the prediction itself may have been part of the cause. The show knows exactly what it's doing with this reputation. And in that same season 34 episode, Lisa the Boy Scout, the hacker's fake deleted scenes include a bit where a 30-year-old Bart from the future travels back to the first episode and lists off predictions including Trump's presidency, the Disney-Fox merger, pandemics, gas hoarding, and Germany beating Brazil 7-1 in the 2014 World Cup. The show isn't just passively letting people find predictions in old episodes, it's actively playing into the mythology, feeding the beast, encouraging the idea that it knows something the rest of us don't. In March 2025, Disney Plus launched a 24/7, always-on Simpsons stream featuring seasons 1 through 35 on a continuous loop. The show now plays non-stop, all day, every day, on one of the world's largest streaming platforms. It never stops broadcasting. It never stops planting seeds. It never stops shaping how people think about the past, the present, and the future. The prediction theory suggests The Simpsons understands the future better than anyone. But there's one prediction the show has been making since the very beginning that nobody talks about. A prediction about its own characters, a theory about what the show is really saying about family, happiness, and the meaning of life itself. And it all goes back to that conversation between Homer and God that we talked about at the very beginning of this video. We started this video with Homer the Heretic, Season 4, Episode 3. Homer asks God the meaning of life. God starts to answer. The episode cuts to credits. We never hear what God says. For decades, fans have treated this as a simple gag. The show teases a profound revelation and then yanks it away. In classic Simpsons humor, the joke is that you'll never know. But a theory originally proposed by a Reddit user named RaceOffDavies takes this scene seriously and follows it to a conclusion that explains everything about Homer's character from that point forward. The theory is that God told Homer he's a cartoon character. God told Homer that nothing around him is real, that his wife, his children, his friends, his town, his entire reality is a fictional construct created for the entertainment of an audience he can never see. And Homer believed it because it was God telling him. And if God tells you something, even something that should be impossible to accept, you accept it. Think about Homer's behavior before this episode versus after. In the early seasons, Homer's a relatable everyman. He's a guy who worries about providing for his family. He stresses about money. He tries to be a good husband even when he falls short. He's embarrassed by his failures. He has genuine emotional reactions to the events in his life. He's not sophisticated, but he's human. He cares about things. After his conversation with God, Homer gradually changes. He becomes more reckless. He becomes more indifferent to danger. He becomes more willing to do insane, dangerous, destructive things without worrying about consequences. Fans have a name for this shift. They call it jerk-ass Homer. It's the version of Homer that appears in the middle to late seasons, the Homer who is crueler, more selfish, and seemingly incapable of learning from his mistakes. Critics of the show point to the shift as evidence that the writing declined. The character became a cartoon, they say. He stopped feeling real. But under this theory, that's exactly the point. Homer stopped feeling real because Homer learned that he isn't real. If God told you that your entire existence is a scripted performance designed to make strangers laugh, how would you react? If nothing you do has real consequences because it's all fiction, why would you take anything seriously? Why would you worry about safety when you can't actually die? Why would you stress about money when your financial situation resets every week? Why would you treat people with care when they're not real people? Homer's nihilism, his alcoholism, his apparent stupidity, his willingness to destroy things and hurt people without remorse, all of it makes sense if he's operating under the knowledge that none of it matters. He's not getting dumber over the course of the series, he's caring less. There's a difference. A man who knows he's in a TV show would behave exactly like Homer Simpson behaves in the later seasons. He would eat whatever he wants because health doesn't matter in a cartoon. He would take insane risks because death doesn't stick in a TV show. He would treat his family carelessly because they'll be reset to their default emotional state by next episode. Homer's drinking takes on a completely different meaning under this reading. He's not an alcoholic because he's sad or stressed. He's self-medicating to cope with the existential horror of knowing his entire reality is a performance. How do you get through the day when you know you're a puppet? You stay drunk enough to not think about it. You numb yourself until the knowledge recedes and you can pretend, at least for a few hours, that the beer in your hand is real, that the couch under you is real, that the family sitting next to you is real. Homer's catchphrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub," no wait, that's Rick Sanchez. But the parallel is interesting. Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty has a catchphrase that secretly means, "I am in great pain, please help me," in an alien language. Homer's equivalent might be dough. It's an expression of frustration and surprise that Homer uses constantly. But if Homer knows he's in a show, dough might be less about the immediate frustration and more about the cosmic absurdity of being a conscious entity trapped in a fiction. Every dough is Homer acknowledging on some level and that the universe just did something to him that only makes sense if his life is scripted for an audience's entertainment. The conversation with God also connects back to the coma theory in an interesting way. Whether Homer is in a coma dreaming his life or whether Homer learned from God that he's fictional, the result is identical. In both cases, Homer is a man who knows on some level that his reality isn't what it appears to be. And in both cases, his response to that knowledge is the same. He checks out, he stops trying, he embraces ignorance and pleasure as the only rational responses to an impossible truth. The coma theory and the God theory aren't contradictory. They're two different ways of describing the same existential nightmare. There's a moment in the later seasons that supports this reading more directly than fans usually acknowledge. In Homer the Heretic itself, Reverend Lovejoy tries to convince Homer that his dream about God must have been wrong. Homer responds by saying that if God appeared in his dream and told him something, it must be true. Homer takes God's words as absolute truth. Whatever God said to him in those unseen final seconds of the episode, Homer internalized it completely and permanently. And everything about his character from that point forward is filtered through that revelation. The real tragedy of this theory is what it means for Homer's moments of genuine emotion in later seasons. There are episodes where Homer shows real love for Marge, episodes where he sacrifices something important for his kids, episodes where he breaks down and cries. Under the God theory, these moments aren't signs that Homer really cares. They're performances. Homer's playing the role of a loving father because he knows that's what the script requires. He does the emotional beats because that's what keeps the show running. But underneath the performance, there's a man who knows that none of the love, none of the sacrifice, none of the emotion is real. Or maybe there's an even sadder reading. Maybe Homer does genuinely feel love for his family despite knowing they're fictional. Maybe the cruelest part of God's revelation isn't that nothing is real. It's that Homer's feelings are real even though the people he feels them for aren't. He loves a wife who doesn't exist. He worries about children who are constructs. He grieves and laughs and hopes and fears for a family that was written by strangers in a room he'll never see. That's not just sad, that's horrifying. That's a man experiencing real emotions about fake things forever with no escape and no resolution. The God theory makes Homer Simpson one of the most tragic characters in the history of fiction. Not because terrible things happen to him, but because he knows that terrible things don't matter. And he has to keep living anyway, performing happiness for an audience that will never understand what it costs him. This brings us to one more theory before we wrap up, and it involves the death of the one character who might have figured out that something in Springfield is deeply, fundamentally wrong. Maud Flanders. Maud Flanders died in season 11, episode 14, Alone Again, Turadiddly, when she was hit by several t-shirts launched from a cannon at the Springfield Speedway. It was a sudden, shocking, and deliberately absurd death. The show killed Maud not because of some grand narrative plan, but because voice actress Maggie Roswell had a contract dispute and left the show. The writers needed to write Maud out, and they chose death. But a theory originally posted by a user named Diversity Pumpkin on the No Homers fan forum suggests that Maud's death wasn't just a production necessity, it was cosmic justice. Because according to this theory, Maud Flanders was a sociopath. The theory points to specific scenes across multiple seasons where Maud's behavior toward Ned is suspicious. On several occasions throughout the series when Ned is in danger, Maud either leaves him to fend for himself or shows conspicuously little concern for his safety. During a bear attack, Maud doesn't try to help Ned. When a comet threatens Springfield, Maud's reaction to Ned's potential death is muted at best. In situations where a loving spouse would be terrified, Maud is calm. Too calm. On the surface, Maud appears to be the perfect Christian wife. She's polite, she goes to church, she supports her husband's business, she raises their children with apparent care. But the theory argues that this surface persona hides something much colder. Maud's public displays of affection for Ned are performative. Her actual behavior in moments of crisis suggests she either doesn't care about his survival or actively wouldn't mind if something happened to him now. And connect this to the Ned Flanders devil theory we discussed earlier. If Ned really is a supernatural entity pretending to be human, Maud might have been the one person who sensed it. Not consciously, maybe. But on some primal level, Maud might have recognized that the man she married wasn't quite right, that something behind his eyes was older and stranger than it should be. And her apparent indifference to his safety wasn't sociopathy. It was self-preservation. An unconscious instinct telling her that the thing sleeping next to her every night was something she should keep at arm's length. The twisted irony is that Maude died from a freak accident while Ned survived everything the universe threw at him. If Maude really was the one person in Springfield who intuited that Ned was dangerous, right, the universe silenced her before she could act on that knowledge. And Ned, the entity who survives everything, just kept on smiling. He mourned Maude publicly, moved on with his life, and continued being the perfect neighbor. Because that's what he does. That's what he's always done. Whatever Ned Flanders actually is, he's very, very good at his job. The Maude theory is dark, but it connects to every other theory we've discussed tonight. Springfield is a place where things aren't what they seem, where the nice neighbor might be the devil, where the town idiot might be a genius, where the baby might be a killer, where the bartender might be in on the joke, where the yellow skin might be radiation poisoning, where the predictions might be programming, where the whole thing might be a coma dream, or a television show that knows it's a television show, or a pocket dimension where time doesn't work and death doesn't stick. And we're not done yet, because there are more theories hiding in the corners of this show, theories that most people haven't heard, and they deserve their time in the spotlight. Let's talk about Homer and Mr. Burns. The standard reading of their relationship is simple. Burns is the evil boss. Homer is the incompetent employee. Burns can never remember Homer's name, despite Homer being one of his longest tenured workers. It's a running gag that's been going since the first season. Burns looks at Homer, the man who has worked at his plant for decades, and says, "Who is that man?" every single time. It's funny because it's absurd. How can you not remember someone who works for you after 30 years? But a fan theory flips this completely. The theory suggests Burns knows exactly who Homer is. Burns remembers Homer perfectly well. The whole "who is this man" routine is an act, and Burns is doing it on purpose. Here's the logic. Homer Simpson is the safety inspector at the Springfield nuclear power plant. The plant is a catastrophic mess of safety violations, environmental crimes, and regulatory nightmares. If anyone in the government or the media ever seriously investigated the plant, the first person they'd interview would be the safety inspector. Homer is the one person whose testimony could get the plant shut down and Burns thrown in prison. So Burns pretends not to know who Homer is. By acting like Homer is so insignificant that he can't even remember his name, Burns accomplishes several things at once. He demoralizes Homer and making him feel too small and unimportant to ever challenge authority. He creates a paper trail of apparent ignorance, so if anyone ever asks, "Did you know your safety inspector was incompetent?" Burns can truthfully say he didn't even know who the man was. And he keeps Homer in a state of perpetual insecurity, always trying to impress a boss who won't even learn his name, which makes Homer desperate for approval and unlikely to blow the whistle on anything. In the one episode where Homer does blow the whistle, Homar from season 12, it happens because Homer temporarily becomes a genius after having the crayon removed from his brain. Genius Homer writes a detailed report that gets the plant shut down. This terrifies Burns, and what happens? Homer gets the crayon put back in, he reverts to his normal self, the plant reopens. And Burns goes back to pretending he doesn't know Homer's name. The system corrects itself. The threat is neutralized. And Burns' strategy of keeping Homer dumb, demoralized, and invisible continues working perfectly. This theory makes Burns not just a greedy old man, but a genuinely brilliant manipulator. He's not forgetting Homer, he's managing Homer, he's keeping the one person who could destroy his empire feeling too worthless to ever try. And Homer, whether because of the crayon, the radiation, or his own choice to be ignorant, plays right into it. The most powerful man in Springfield and the least powerful man in Springfield are locked in a relationship where one is secretly controlling the other, and the controlled party has no idea it's happening. There's another theory about a different character that takes the show in a weirdly meta direction. A Reddit user named Just Embarrassing proposed that Bart Simpson grows up to become Matt Groening, the real Matt Groening, the actual creator of The Simpsons. This sounds insane, but the evidence is kind of compelling. Matt Groening has openly stated that he based The Simpsons on his own family. The character names are largely drawn from real people in Groening's life. Homer and Marge are named after his actual parents. Lisa and Maggie are named after his real sisters. Bart is an anagram of brat, and while he's not named directly after Groening, the character is widely understood to be an exaggerated version of Groening's own childhood self. The theory takes this one step further. If Bart is based on young Matt Groening, and The Simpsons exists within its own universe, then maybe within that universe, Bart literally becomes the person who creates The Simpsons. The show has demonstrated that Bart has genuine creative talent. He ghostwrote an itchy and scratchy episode that won critical acclaim. He created the animated series Angry Dad that won an Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film in Season 24. Bart has shown a natural aptitude for storytelling, comedy, and visual media. Bart is also a natural satirist. He mocks authority constantly. He finds humor in dysfunction. He uses comedy as a weapon and as a coping mechanism. These are exactly the skills that would lead someone to create a satirical animated series about a dysfunctional American family. If Bart grew up, channeled his creative energy into something productive, and based a television show on his own family, the result would be exactly The Simpsons. This creates a bizarre loop. The Simpsons is a show created by Matt Groening about a family based on his own family. Within the show, Bart has the skills and temperament to grow up and create a show about his own family. If that show is The Simpsons, then the show is writing itself into existence. Bart creates the show that creates Bart that creates the show. It's an Ouroboros of fiction and reality, a snake eating its own tail, and it might be the most elegant closed loop in television theory. Now let's talk about one more theory, and this one ties a lot of what we've discussed together. It's the idea that The Simpsons isn't telling stories at all, that the show is actually arguing across 800 episodes and 37 seasons, that stories themselves are a trap, and the only honest response to existence is to stop looking for meaning and just watch TV. This reading comes primarily from the interdimensional cable episodes. Well, actually, those are Rick and Morty. But The Simpsons has its own version of this concept, and it shows up most clearly in the early seasons. The show keeps presenting characters who search for meaning and showing that the search itself makes them miserable. Lisa searches for meaning through intelligence, activism, and spiritual exploration. She becomes a vegetarian because she believes in something. She becomes a Buddhist because she's searching for truth. She fights for environmental causes, social justice, and intellectual honesty. And she's the most depressed character on the show. Her search for meaning hasn't brought her peace. It's brought her isolation. Homer, by contrast, doesn't search for anything. He sits on the couch, he drinks beer, he watches TV, he eats donuts. He doesn't ask big questions about the universe or his place in it. And Homer is, for all his problems, fundamentally happy. His life is a mess by any objective standard, but he doesn't care because he's not measuring himself against any standard. He's just existing, just being, just sitting there, content, in a way that Lisa, with all her intelligence and all her searching, can never achieve. Marge searches for fulfillment through her family and keeps getting disappointed. Bart searches for excitement and keeps getting punished. Even Mr. Burns, who searches for power and wealth, is one of the most miserable characters in Springfield despite having everything money can buy. The characters who want things, who seek things, who try to find deeper meaning in their lives, all end up worse off than the characters who simply accept what they have. The show's most direct statement of this philosophy comes from a moment that a lot of people associate with a different show entirely. The idea that nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, everybody's going to die is usually attributed to Morty from Rick and Morty. But The Simpsons got there first. The show has been arguing for decades that the pursuit of meaning is the source of all suffering, and that the only rational response to a meaningless universe is to stop asking questions, crack open a beer, and enjoy whatever random entertainment happens to be on television. Homer figured this out before anyone else. That's why he's on the couch. And that's why he's always been on the couch. He's not lazy, he's enlightened. He's the one character who understood, whether through God's revelation or his own instincts, that seeking meaning leads to misery. And his reward for this understanding is the most peaceful life in Springfield. Not the best life, not the most impressive life, but the most peaceful one. The Simpsons has been telling us this for 37 seasons. The family is yellow because they live next to a nuclear plant that's slowly poisoning them. They're secretly geniuses who chose ignorance because intelligence hurts. Their patriarch is a billionaire who forgot about his fortune. Their neighbor is the devil. Their bartender knows the truth and plays along anyway. Their town exists outside normal time and space. Their future was written before it happened. And the meaning of life was whispered by God to a cartoon character who took the secret to his grave, or his coma, or wherever it is that Homer Simpson actually exists. But before we close this out, there are a few more theories that deserve attention. Because the deeper you look into this show, the more you find. Let's talk about Frank Grimes, Season 8, Episode 23, Homer's Enemy. This episode is considered one of the most important in the entire series, and it's also one of the cruelest. A man named Frank Grimes starts working at the Springfield nuclear power plant. Unlike every other character in the show, Frank Grimes is a realistic person. He grew up in poverty. He worked hard his entire life. He earned his qualifications through genuine effort and sacrifice. He represents what a real human being would look like if they were dropped into the world of The Simpsons, and the world of The Simpsons destroys him. Grimes is horrified by everything he sees. Homer is a safety inspector who sleeps at work, eats donuts all day, and has nearly caused meltdowns on multiple occasions. Yet Homer faces no consequences. He's never fired. He's never punished. He's rewarded with promotions, adventures, and a life that no person with his level of incompetence could ever achieve in the real world. Homer has been to space. He's won a Grammy. He lives in a nice house with a loving family. Frank Grimes has worked harder than Homer every day of his life and has nothing to show for it. Grimes tries to expose Homer's incompetence. He tries to make everyone see what he sees, but nobody cares. The other characters in Springfield don't find Homer's absurd luck to be strange because, in their reality, it isn't strange. Springfield operates on different rules. In Springfield, a man can be launched into space because of a clerical error and come home a hero. In Springfield, a baby can shoot a billionaire and face no legal consequences. In Springfield, the laws of cause and effect simply do not apply the way they do in the real world. Frank Grimes can't accept this. It drives him insane. And at the end of the episode, in a moment of manic frustration, Grimes grabs high-voltage power lines and electrocutes himself. He dies. At his funeral, Homer falls asleep and starts muttering in his sleep, and everyone laughs. Even in death, Frank Grimes can't escape the absurdity of Homer's universe. Even his funeral becomes a Homer Simpson comedy bit. The theory around this episode is that Frank Grimes is the audience. He's us. He's every person who has ever watched The Simpsons and thought, wait, how does Homer get away with this? He's the voice of reason, asking why a cartoon character lives by different rules than real people. And the show's answer is brutal. You don't get to ask that question. The rules of Springfield are the rules of Springfield. If you can't accept them, if you insist on applying real-world logic to a place that doesn't operate on real-world logic, it will kill you, literally. Homer's Enemy is the show telling its audience, stop looking for realism. Stop expecting consequences. Stop demanding that this fictional world makes sense by your standards. Because if you do, you'll end up like Frank Grimes. Dead, unmourned, and forgotten by the very people whose absurdity killed you. This episode, written by John Swartzwelder and directed by Jim Reardon, aired in 1997. It's essentially the show deconstructing itself. It takes every complaint a viewer could have about the increasing unrealism of The Simpsons and personifies those complaints as a man who goes crazy and dies. The message is clear. The Simpsons knows it doesn't make sense. It doesn't care. And if you can't make peace with that, the show has no use for you. Under the coma theory, Homer's enemy becomes even more interesting. If everything post-season 4 is Homer's dream, then Frank Grimes is Homer's subconscious trying to wake him up. Grimes is the part of Homer's brain that knows the dream isn't real, that things can't possibly be this good, that a man who sleeps at work and almost blows up the town shouldn't have a beautiful wife and a house and a Grammy. Grimes represents reality trying to reassert itself inside the dream, and Homer's dreaming brain kills that voice before it can succeed. The coma protects itself by destroying the one character who threatened to expose the illusion. Now here's another theory that hides in one of the show's most beloved episodes. In Season 6, Episode 12, Homer the Great, Homer discovers that his friends Lenny and Carl are members of a secret society called the Stonecutters. The Stonecutters are a parody of Freemasonry and other real-world secret societies. They have elaborate rituals, a hierarchy based on numbers, and they control virtually everything in Springfield from behind the scenes. Traffic lights, the British Crown. For the metric system, according to their song, the Stonecutters are pulling the strings on all of it. Homer is desperate to join. When he finally does, he discovers a birthmark on his body that identifies him as the Chosen One, a prophesied figure destined to lead the Stonecutters. Homer is immediately elevated to supreme leadership. The other members worship him. They carry him around on a throne. They do whatever he says. Most people treat this as a one-off comedy episode. Homer bumbles into power, abuses it, and everything resets by the end. Standard Simpsons formula. But the theory asks a deeper question. What if the Stonecutters are real within the show's mythology? What if a secret society really does control Springfield? And what if Homer's identification as the Chosen One is legitimate? Think about Homer's impossible luck throughout the series. He's been to space, he's met presidents, he's survived events that should have killed him hundreds of times. He's been at the center of virtually every major event in Springfield's history. If a secret society really is pulling the strings in Springfield, and if Homer really is their prophesied leader, then his absurd fortune isn't random, it's manufactured. The Stonecutters have been protecting Homer, guiding events in his favor, ensuring that the Chosen One survives no matter what. Homer's unbelievable luck isn't luck at all. It's divine intervention by a secret order that recognized him at birth and has been shaping his destiny ever since. This also explains why Homer can never be fired from the nuclear plant, despite being catastrophically bad at his job. Burns might want to fire Homer, but the Stonecutters won't allow it. The secret society needs their Chosen One in a position of influence, and the nuclear plant, the facility that controls the town's power supply, is the perfect place for him. Homer isn't staying employed because of cartoon logic. He's staying employed because an invisible power structure is making sure of it. By the end of the episode, the Stonecutters disband and reform as the ancient mystic society of no Homers. They exclude Homer and start fresh without him. But the theory suggests this was just a public-facing change. The real society, the one that operates behind the scenes, never stopped watching over Homer. They just stopped letting him attend the meetings. Here's one more theory, and this one is about Krusty the Clown. There's a well-documented fact about the early development of The Simpsons that most casual viewers don't know. When Matt Groening and the writing team were first designing the show, Krusty the Clown was originally going to be Homer Simpson in disguise. The idea was that Homer would secretly moonlight as a television clown, and his own son Bart would be his biggest fan without knowing that his idol and his father were the same person. The writers planned a reveal where Bart discovers the truth, and the emotional core of the episode would be Bart realizing that the person he admired most in the world was the person he had the least respect for at home. The writers ultimately abandoned this concept because they felt the double life premise was too complex for the show's format. But they kept the character of Krusty, and they kept his design. Look at Krusty the Clown. Really look at him. Remove the makeup, the big red nose, the green hair. What you're left with is Homer Simpson. Same round head, same overbite, same body type, same general proportions. Krusty the Clown looks exactly like Homer Simpson because he was originally supposed to be Homer Simpson. The fan theory takes this production detail and runs with it. What if, within the show's universe, there's a reason Krusty looks like Homer? What if they're related? Krusty's real name is Herschel Schmoikel, Pinchas Yerucham Krustovsky. He's Jewish. His father, Rabbi Hyman Krustovsky, appeared in the season 3 episode Like Father, Like Clown. There's no obvious family connection to the Simpson family, but the resemblance is undeniable. And some fans have speculated that Homer and Krusty might be half-brothers, or that the Simpson family and the Krustovsky family share common ancestry that explains their identical physical appearance. Under the radiation theory, they might both be products of the same mutagenic environment, their similar appearances the result of nuclear exposure affecting 2 different families in the same way. Under the coma theory, Krusty looking like Homer makes perfect sense because Homer's dreaming brain would naturally model other characters on the face he sees most, his own. Whatever the explanation, the fact remains that Krusty the Clown is a walking ghost of a creative decision from the show's earliest days. He's a version of Homer that never quite existed, preserved in amber, named performing on a stage inside the same show that decided not to let him be who he was originally supposed to be. He's an alternate universe Homer, trapped in clown makeup, forever separated from the character he was designed to be identical to. The Simpsons is full of these ghosts, discarded ideas that left traces in the final product, production decisions that accidentally created mysteries, writing shortcuts that became mythology. The show has been running so long and producing so much content that it's developed a kind of sedimentary layer of unintentional meaning. Theories accumulate on top of theories, patterns emerge from random noise, and fans, armed with decades of material to analyze, find connections that the writers never intended but that are nonetheless real within the text of the show. And maybe that's the final theory. Maybe the most disturbing thing about The Simpsons isn't any individual fan theory, but the fact that the show has been running long enough for its random details to achieve the density of religious scripture. People study The Simpsons the way medieval scholars studied sacred texts, looking for hidden meanings, tracking contradictions, arguing about interpretations. The show has become so vast and so self-referential that it generates meaning automatically, whether the creators intend it or not. Every background gag is potential prophecy. Every character quirk is potential psychology. Every animation error is potential evidence. The Simpsons didn't set out to be mythology. It set out to be a cartoon about a family. But when you run a cartoon about a family for 37 years across 800 episodes, mythology is what you get. The sheer weight of accumulated story starts to behave like something bigger than the sum of its parts. Patterns appear, themes crystallize, and fans, starving for meaning in a world that often feels as random and absurd as Springfield itself, find in The Simpsons the same thing people have always found in their myths: explanations, warnings, comfort, and the nagging suspicion that someone somewhere knows more than they're telling. There's one more layer to this that we haven't fully explored, and it ties everything together. The Treehouse of Horror specials. Every year since season 2, The Simpsons has aired a Halloween special consisting of 3 short segments that are officially non-canonical. In these episodes, anything goes. Homer can be murdered. Bart can become a vampire. Lisa can be eaten by aliens. Where Springfield can be destroyed by a meteor, a zombie apocalypse, a time paradox, or a sentient AI. The show uses these episodes to tell stories it could never tell within the normal continuity. The standard explanation is simple. These are just fun, non-canonical horror parodies. They don't count, they didn't really happen, enjoy the gore, and move on. But under the framework we've been building tonight, the Treehouse of Horror specials start to look like something else entirely. If Springfield exists outside normal reality, trapped in a pocket dimension where time doesn't flow correctly and death doesn't stick, then the Treehouse of Horror episodes might be the moments when that dimensional bubble becomes thin enough for the real nature of Springfield's situation to bleed through. The monsters aren't fictional within the fiction. They're real threats from whatever exists outside the bubble. The aliens Kang and Kodos don't just appear in Halloween specials for laughs. They appear because Halloween is when the barrier between Springfield's trapped reality and the wider universe is at its weakest. Think about it this way. In normal episodes, the show operates under rules. People don't die permanently. Physics works, mostly. Things reset by the end. But in Treehouse of Horror, all those rules break. People die real deaths. Physics stops applying, reality fractures. What if the normal episodes are the dream, the controlled environment, the managed reality, and the Treehouse of Horror episodes are the truth leaking in? What if the show's most fictional episodes are actually its most honest? The show has aired over 30 Treehouse of Horror specials. Well, and that's 30 times that Springfield's reality has cracked open. 30 times that the characters have experienced genuine horror, genuine death, genuine cosmic threats. And every time, by the next regular episode, everything is back to normal. Nobody remembers. Nobody carries the trauma forward. The reset is total. If you were designing a prison dimension, a reality bubble meant to contain a population of people without them knowing they were contained, this is exactly how it would work. Let the subjects live their normal lives. Give them a comfortable routine. Let them believe they're in control. And when the containment field occasionally weakens and the real world bleeds through, just reset their memories and start again. The subjects will write off the breach as a bad dream, a holiday special, and a story that didn't really happen. The perfect prison is one where the prisoners don't know they're imprisoned. And the perfect containment protocol is one where evidence of containment is automatically classified as fiction. The Treehouse of Horror episodes have gotten increasingly meta over the years. Recent installments have featured the characters becoming aware of their own fictional nature, interacting with the show's production process, or encountering entities that seem to exist outside the normal Simpsons universe. In Treehouse of Horror 33 from season 34, a segment called Simpsons World directly plays with the idea of the characters being trapped in a simulation. The show is increasingly comfortable with the idea that Springfield might not be what it appears to be. And every time it explores that idea, it does so in a Treehouse of Horror episode, the one format where it can be honest and still get away with it by calling the whole thing non-canon. The Simpsons has been using its Halloween specials as a pressure valve for decades. Every disturbing truth about Springfield's nature, every hint that the characters are trapped, every suggestion that reality isn't what it seems, all of it gets channeled into Treehouse of Horror and safely labeled not real. But if the normal episodes are the illusion and the Halloween specials are the truth, then The Simpsons has been confessing what Springfield really is for over 30 years. It just does it once a year in a format that lets everyone pretend it's a joke. The scariest Simpsons theory isn't about Homer being in a coma, or Springfield being radioactive, or Ned being the devil. The scariest theory is that the show knows it's lying to us, that the writers, whether intentionally or through some process they don't fully understand, have been encoding the truth about Springfield's impossible, trapped, looping, radioactive, time-frozen, dimensionally unstable reality into Halloween specials that we've all been trained to dismiss. The truth isn't hidden, it airs every October. We just choose not to believe it because it comes wrapped in a treehouse. Homer chose the couch. Homer chose the beer. Homer chose ignorance. And maybe, without realizing it, we're making the same choice every time we laugh at a Treehouse of Horror special and say, that one doesn't count. We're choosing to believe that Springfield is normal. We're choosing to believe that the yellow skin is just an art style. We're choosing to believe that the predictions are coincidences and the agelessness is a cartoon convention, and the reset at the end of every episode is just how TV works. We're choosing happiness over intelligence. We're choosing Homer's strategy. And honestly, given what the alternative looks like, who can blame us? Every theory we've talked about tonight is really just people looking at a cartoon family and seeing reflections of their own fears. The fear that your reality isn't real. The fear that the people you love are hiding something. The fear that the universe is indifferent. The fear that happiness requires ignorance. The fear that intelligence is a prison. The fear that your town is killing you and you're too oblivious to notice. The Simpsons doesn't answer these fears. It doesn't resolve them. It does something better. It sits with them. It takes the darkest questions humans can ask. Is any of this real? Does anything matter? Are we all just trapped in a loop? And it wraps them in yellow skin and four-fingered hands and makes them bearable. It turns existential dread into a half-hour comedy. It makes the horror watchable. And then it resets, and next week the horror is different, and the family is still on the couch, and Homer still has his beer, and everything is fine. Everything is always fine in Springfield. Not because things are actually fine, but because fine is the only option when you've been running for 37 seasons and there's no end in sight. The internet has even generated its own mythology around The Simpsons. There's a famous creepypasta called Dead Bart that describes a fictional lost episode of the show in which Bart falls out of a plane window during a family trip and dies on impact. The creepypasta describes the episode in disturbing detail, claiming the animation deteriorates as the family grieves, becoming crude and unsettling, and that the final frames show real photographs of celebrity guest stars who later died in real life, photographs that were supposedly taken after their deaths. None of this is real. The episode doesn't exist. It never existed. But Dead Bart became so widely shared and discussed online that The Simpsons actually acknowledged it. Season 30, Episode 1, Bart's Not Dead, is a direct response to the creepypasta. The title alone is the show telling the internet, no, Bart didn't die. Stop asking. But the fact that a fictional horror story about The Simpsons became famous enough for the actual show to respond tells you something about the relationship between this series and its audience. The Simpsons has been on the air so long that it spawned its own folklore, its own urban legends, its own mythology. The show doesn't just exist as entertainment anymore, it exists as a cultural text that people interpret, argue about, and create secondary stories around. The same way ancient civilizations created secondary myths around their primary religious texts. The Simpsons has become, in a very real sense, modern mythology. Not because it set out to be, but because any story that runs for 37 years and touches billions of lives eventually transcends its original purpose and becomes something larger than anyone intended. The show's creator, Matt Groening, gave an interview once where he talked about the yellow color choice. He said, "It looks like there's something wrong with your TV set." And he thought that was appropriate to The Simpsons symbolically. Think about that statement. The creator of The Simpsons believes on some level that the show should look like something is wrong. Not wrong with the characters, not wrong with the story, wrong with your television, wrong with the medium itself, wrong with reality as it's being presented to you. Maybe Matt Groening was just talking about art direction, or maybe like Homer sitting on his couch pretending the coma isn't real. Groening was telling us exactly what The Simpsons is. A show where something is wrong, something you can feel but can't quite name. Something that hides in the yellow skin and the four fingers and the town that can't be found on any map. The Simpsons started in 1989 as a crude animated short on The Tracy Ullman Show. It became the longest-running scripted series in American television history. It changed the English language. It predicted the future. It inspired every adult animated show that came after it, from South Park to Rick and Morty, to Family Guy to Bob's Burgers. It has been honored with 35 Primetime Emmy Awards and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. "O" is in the Oxford English Dictionary. Ambient is in Merriam-Webster. The show has generated $1 billion merchandising industry. It has its own area at Universal Studios. It airs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Disney+. Its longtime composer Alf Clausen scored nearly 600 episodes over 27 seasons with a 35-piece orchestra before his departure in 2017. And underneath all of that, underneath the awards and the merchandise and the cultural dominance, there's a man on a couch with a beer, watching TV, surrounded by a family that may or may not be real, in a town that may or may not exist, in a reality that may or may not be a dream. And he's happy. Or at least he's performing happiness so convincingly that it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. That might be the most disturbing Simpsons theory of all. Not that Homer's in a coma, not that Springfield is radioactive, not that Ned Flanders is the devil, but that the difference between genuine happiness and performed happiness doesn't matter. That the most successful strategy for survival in an absurd universe is to stop asking whether your joy is real and just feel it. That the smartest man in Springfield is the one everyone calls an idiot, because he figured out something the geniuses never will. Ignorance isn't the absence of knowledge. It's the presence of peace. The Simpsons has been telling us the meaning of life for 37 seasons. We just keep looking for theories instead of listening. Homer already knows the answer. He's known since season 4. God told him. And Homer did the smartest thing anyone could do with that kind of information. He sat back down on the couch, he grabbed a duff, and he watched TV. And somewhere out there, if in a hospital bed or a pocket dimension or a cartoon universe or wherever it is that Homer Simpson really lives, he's still watching, still sitting, still choosing peace over truth, comfort over clarity, happiness over intelligence, still performing the role of the lovable idiot for an audience that has been watching him for longer than most marriages last, still yellow, still four-fingered, still trapped in a town that doesn't exist on any map, in a body that doesn't age, in a story that never ends. And if you've made it this far into this video, you're doing exactly what Homer would do. You're lying down, you're listening to someone talk about something that doesn't really matter. You're letting the theories wash over you the way Homer lets his dreams wash over him in that hospital bed. You're choosing not to think too hard. You're choosing the couch. Welcome to Springfield. You've been here the whole time, you just didn't know it. But now you do, and the question is the same one every Simpson has faced at some point. Do you want to keep looking for the truth, or do you want to grab a duff, put your feet up, and let the credits roll? If you've learned anything from 37 seasons of this show, you already know the right answer. And you already know it's the wrong one too. That's the joke. That's always been the joke. That's it for today. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like these.